Hey, what's up, everybody? Lawler here. Last week during Q&A Sunday, I talked a lot about coaching based upon the questions you guys were asking. And unfortunately, a lot of those things I had to answer I don't know to, because I haven't involved or interacted with the coaching side of things for a long time. I can't provide that level of insight on a specific level, and said that, you know what, the heck with that. Let's actually deep dive into it. Let's get someone who can physically say, that is what I do. This is how I got in there. These are the things I go through. This is how roster changes happen. And actually bring it to that point. We're going to be talking with Gregan today, the coach of Guild Esports, former World Championship coach, on Vitality. A lot of insight and perspective that he can provide in multiple facets of the Rocket League scene. So without further ado, let's talk with Gregan. Whether you know him for his casting debut in Season 2 at Amsterdam, whether it was on accident or not, doesn't matter. Or if you know him for a World Championship victory with part of the team of Vitality, or shilling out like crazy, as you can see on camera right now, for Guild Esports. It is the one and only Gregan. Long time, man. It's been a bit. It has been a little bit. How you doing, bud?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. It has been a while. There's been no land, so it's a chance to stay away from the Americans for a bit, leave them be, and then we have our own peaceful time over here in the UK working from home. But it's been so long, and I do miss everybody from lands. I mean, when we think how often we were doing them in the year just before lockdown, it's such a different lifestyle now, you know?
Yeah, it's crazy. We went from obviously 2 a year plus 2019, which many consider like the peak of esports, where there was 4 dream hacks and everything else. But I'm going to tell Wavepunk you said that about how you're happy to be away from the Americans. I think you're going to hurt his feelings on that one.
Do you know what? The first person I thought of when I thought I haven't been to London for ages was I haven't seen Wavepunk in so long.
Oh, I know there's a relationship. I know there's something behind the scenes there. I've been part of that little trifecta of being like, I should leave you to be. So I get it. There's a little bias.
He's my boy. He's my boy.
Yeah, we love Wavepunk.
In fact, the Season 2, when I got onto the desk as the guest, when we passed over to the casters, it was Wavepunk, and I can't remember the other caster, and he called me Bay on RLCS, and it was like, whoa, we keep that one private, not on.
He's making it more than Facebook official, man. Jesus.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. If you kind of don't know the context of what's going on, I explained it briefly in the intro, and the reason why you're being brought on. Last week during every Sunday in my videos, I do what's called a Q&A Sunday, where I take questions literally from chat every Sunday, whatever they want. Last week had a lot of focus about coaching and what it actually means to be a coach, what goes into it, how do I become a coach, all these things that we haven't really seen anybody directly address. We haven't really heard anybody talk specifically about, well, this is how I got into coaching, and obviously it's gonna be different for every perspective. This is what it's like to go through a roster change, which you guys are currently doing right now. This is what it's like to actually be in comms during, like, we haven't really had anybody talk about it with brevity to get into the specifics of what goes into coaching. So we'll get into that eventually, because I know we'll probably sidetrack in some capacity, because we always do, but that's kind of what makes Rocket Talk. So to kind of go with the generic stuff right off the bat, there's a lot of conversation of, well, we know how some coaches come into be. They're a former pro, they transition into the role because they're well respected, and there's a couple minds that come to that. Like, I think Farrell will be a fantastic coach in the future if he decides to go that route, but there's a couple players that you can kind of do that. Gregan, I know you're a good player. I don't want to boost your ego more than it already has been. But how did you become a coach for a world-class team like Vitality?
Yeah, I mean, every story, there's going to be crazy circumstances in hindsight where you think that's so unlikely to happen for someone new, but it's all about just meeting people and making those connections. But I was a caster before going into coaching. When I first joined the Rocket League scene, at the time I was quite heavily involved in Minecraft, so I used to be part of the Nox crew, who are one of the biggest build teams in Minecraft. And back when we used to go to Insomnia Gaming Festival, every single event would run a booth, so I'd go along with them. And around the time Rocket League came out, I was the guy in the community who loved Rocket League, put way more hours than all my friends into it. I used to actually play with Crafters, Mr. Craftman, who's a community caster, Scottish guy who casted the IWO. We used to play back together because he was in my Minecraft community. And then at Insomnia, 2 of my friends who were commentating the first ever Rocket League LAN competition they used to run at Insomnia's, they were like, do you want to be a guest commentator in the final? And I was like, yeah, sure, it'll be a bit of fun. And I was watching the final, I was like, firstly, I'm better than all these players, so, you know, why did I not just compete in this? But secondly, I had a very analytical mind, so I was always reading the play, reading what teams were doing and all that kind of stuff. And people in my friend group were like, you should get into this, you should start commentating. So I went home, emailed James Bot, who at the time used to do a lot of community stuff with Cloud Fuel in the RLC days. And then I went on, chatted with them, and they were looking for European casters who were very few and far between at the time. I think it was like Shogun and the Pash and Freezing Wolves were the only people. And they needed someone who could host it. And I had a good enough computer to stream. So I used to stream back then for Minecraft stuff. So I was like the person who they got to do all the Rocket League commentary. So I did all that. And then it came to about season 1, season 2, and I started coaching a few friends on the side, coached a team that competed at Insomnia, a little bit in the background. Then I coached in season 2 when there was barely any coaches. It was like, if they had a coach, you didn't really know what the coaches were doing because no one really respected coaches. There was no pros who'd retired. There was very few people who could coach. And I coached Doomsy, Snasky, and ELMP on Supersonic Avengers? Yeah, Supersonic Avengers.
5 points, man. 5 points.
Yeah, and they were 6th, I think, 5th, 6th in league play, and you know it didn't go particularly well, but coached a few more people on the side, and then eventually met with Vitality when I was doing Clash Royale. I was hosting the Clash Royale esports tournament out in LA. Met Vitality there and were like, hey, if you want to get into Rocket League, I'll happily help you out, you know, get you in contact with the right people. So I scouted them a team and had no intention of going into coaching, really. I went into that job as a manager who coached a little bit. And then as time went on, I just took on more and more coaching work. I think it was Scrub in particular, who after season 6, when it didn't go so well for us, he was like, we need to get Gregan in to help, even if it's just be there as a voice to bounce ideas off of. So that's how the coaching started. And I would say now, even looking back on that, I was barely coaching at Vitality. It was more about management and organization and making sure the players were comfortable, getting them to lands and everything smoothly, keeping them hydrated, especially at season 7.
I saw that photo on my phone of you like holding like 40 water bottles at I think that was season 7. I think that was in New Jersey. Yeah.
I was considered the water boy back then. You know, that was the main thing I was trying to do, is just make them feel comfortable, make them feel happy. You know, we did a little bit of coaching, a little bit of replay analysis, but compared to what I do now with Guild, where I feel like I am a coach who barely manages, it's like a whole different job, you know? So I think that the coaching thing, a lot of people think of it as you just go in and you start telling players how to play better, but like at Vitality, I was a manager who got asked every now and again for a bit of advice, whereas as time went on, I started taking on more coaching roles. And then between Vitality and Guild, I was doing Gamers Ready, where I learned a lot just coaching lots of different people. I did a bit of freelance work over at E United, where I coached them for a month and a half, learned a lot there. You know, it's a skill like anything. You know, I've got to learn how to coach better as much as the players need to learn how to play better. So yeah, that's the journey. I guess that's the long journey from start pre-casting all the way to coaching at Guild now. Yeah,
it's crazy how you say too, like even way back at the beginning, how like a lot of the times casters who got picked, the first question, not have you done this before, are you good at it, like what is it, is like, can you stream at a 3500 bit rate? Is that a thing you can do? Because like that was pretty much the qualification. Can we even put on a show? And if you could do that, you automatically gave yourself a leg up, which is just humble beginnings for RLC way back. So yeah, man, it's been a long journey, and it talks about, and which I like that you went into, is the different facets of what a coach could technically be, because there is nowadays more such a concrete difference between a manager and a coach. While a manager is like a professional babysitter, and that's definitely downplaying it a lot. It is a lot different from a coach, but it definitely sounds like the reason why it really started to switch is because a pro gave you that respect level. They gave you that advocacy of, hey, I like what he's doing. Can we please dedicate more to this? It seems like it has to be on the player's behalf, because if you are a coach of a team and your players don't respect you, why are you even there? And finding a way to obtain that respect, I feel like, is the biggest obstacle.
Yeah, I think it comes with respect. Obviously, there's more people now who are capable of coaching than there ever has been in Rocket League. And I also think the scene has developed now where coaches are much more needed. Teams need a external person to help them improve, that they're expected to do so much more in terms of practice. They don't have the time to do their own self-analysis, replay analysis, feedback to themselves, feedback and discussion as a team. They need an external person to lead that, because it's just taking burdens off of the players essentially. It's just like we were talking about it just before the podcast started about how we're both on a fitness journey right now, and
right.
Everyone has it in them to get fitter and to eat better and to diet better, but realistically it's a lot easier if someone does the diet bit for you, like writes it all up, gives you even if they cook it for you, right? And it's a whole lot easier to do fitness if someone's there telling you how to do it better. And it takes a lot of that thinking process of what do I need to do out of the equation. And I think that's why coaching is so important, is it reduces the amount of strain on the players to improve, and it will help them get there quicker. Every coach is going to be different, but ultimately taking responsibility away from a player is the duty of the org, the coach, the manager around the players. And I think that's where the role can be very flexible in terms of more management, more coaching, depending on what the players need.
Which baffles me, man. I know there's some of these organizations that have like team chefs and stuff, and these kids are like, no, I want chicken nuggies and salty fries and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, you literally have the hardest part taken care of for you. The guy's making you delicious meals that are good for you. Eat them. And they're like, no. So yeah, I don't understand that. But the ability to kind of just go into autopilot. I remember when for anybody who has gotten the opportunity to work with like a really, really good production company, the one that comes to mind for me will always be the guys at E-League and Turner Sports. Like, I can't even put on my own jacket without someone doing it for me. I can't even put on my own headset. I'm not allowed to. There's a person that is there to take all the extra stuff outside of me doing my job. I don't have to worry about it. So it allows me to 100% hone in and focus on why I'm there. And it's to commentate, focus on the matches, all that kind of stuff. Everything else, I don't even think about. And I think that's kind of what you're getting at, is your job as a coach is to make it so your only job right now is to play the best Rocket League you can play. I'm going to make everything else taken care of. I want to make it as simple as possible. And that changes from team to team. What that role may be is from Vitality to Guild, I'm sure, is extremely different. Can you tell me about kind of the differences that you've noticed between Vitality as a coach versus Guild as a coach?
Yeah, so I would say that the biggest thing at Vitality was getting everyone on the same page, getting everyone motivated, and I think being the bridge between Scrub and KDOP and Fairy Peak. I think in general, Fairy Peak and KDOP have a very good vision of the game. It's part of the reason why they're so successful, is they see the game in a way that not many pros can, and so they were very good at self-analyzing. And when I spoke to Fairy Peak, we were a lot of the time on the same page, and he'd already come to the conclusion that I would have told him. So there was no need for me to really do crazy one-to-ones with him. I think Scrub needed a little bit more of that one-to-one support, because Scrub, I think, is very coachable. As long as he's on board, right? He's a very coachable player. He takes in information and applies it very quickly. I mean, you just got to look at the moments in stream where someone will be like, do this, and he's so determined when someone says, hey, can you do this thing? He will do it until it's the last thing he does on stream. So he's got a very good mindset towards being given information. And I think the biggest thing, because especially in 2019 when we had all those events, was I tried to make the events as safe as possible for the players, as predictable as possible, and as easy to go through the process. So I used to create a document for every event, and like flight times, flight numbers, and even Google Maps the journey from the airport to whatever venue we were going to, like the hotel, where the venue was, the timings of everything. I would try and get as much information as possible. And I was actually speaking to a friend about it the other day, is my bag used to have everything you need in it. I started taking a portable battery with me everywhere to help charge people's phones. It was even a point where Kate went, have you got any tissues, Gregan? And I went, I don't, but I will from now on. And for every event after that, I had a packet of tissues in my bag. I just wanted it to be like the mule that would walk behind them carrying everything they needed. They would know exactly where they need to be and when, and that was, I think, the most important part of my role at Vitality, where at Guild, we have people to do that for us. We have George, who's the player manager, like esports manager, Grant, who's head of esports. He does bigger things, but he often gets involved on the player level. We've now got a full-time performance director. He was our performance psychologist before. He's now full-time, and he organizes all the like PT, nutritionist, physios, and obviously his own psychology for the players. So that side I don't have to worry about. And then we've got an ops manager who's there for any technical stuff. So at boot camps, he makes sure everything's set up and all that stuff. I just offload, and it's almost
so
now
nice, man.
I am like the players in the sense that I don't have to worry about anything. All I have to worry about is coaching them. So I guess in the sense like you'd refer to it as like the talent in an esports show, the hosts, anyone who's on camera, the analysts, they're all talent. The players are talent. The way I coach at Guild, I get treated like I'm talent. So they look after me. Anything I need, I just ask for it. So it does mean I can just focus on coaching. It means I've got so much more time for things like replay analysis, where in the past I might have skipped over that because I had to go and do a few jobs, organize something, organize that. So I'm just so much more in tune with the players' development and improvement. And I can almost be there as a friend more now, where before I'd have to be a parent, So yeah, it's definitely improved the dynamic there, and it's why I believe what Guild is doing as a process for a Rocket League team is the best process you can do. And obviously you got to believe that, otherwise you try and improve it. But yeah, hopefully this next season we'll start to see that upward growth for the team.
It's crazy to think about, because this is not a standard for every team. There's a lot of teams that miss out on a lot of this stuff, and it definitely shows in the way that the players carry themselves, and the coach, like yourself, the way you carry yourself, the kind of stuff that is now out of sight, out of mind. And even though you may become accustomed to it, talent, whatever you want to refer to it as, consider us as quote unquote divas because we're demanding for these and that thing. But when it is a multi-million-dollar industry, now billion-dollar industry, and there's a lot of things at play, those things can be the difference between first and, nowadays with how good teams are, last. Like sometimes the ability to just put that stuff away and focus primarily on your role is huge. And I'm sure that's got to be a great accommodation for you, the ability to now say, hey, that's one less thing on my plate, and now I can focus in on allocating more time to these things. And that's why they do it. It also allows everybody else to be successful. I like the fact that you talk about there being kind of that relatability as well with your players, where you're like, hey, I'm in the trenches with you guys as well. I'm not on the outside. I am a part of the team. And I can only imagine that helps with the synergy and the bonding of, that, hey, we're in a tough situation. Gregan's on. He's got our back. He's there to make sure we're taken care of, and just being able to ease into it. Because I'm sure there's been times during high pressure situations where, there's a little bit of hesitation between, okay, he's saying this thing, but do I really believe it? Do I really want to be on board? Has there been like specific moments that you can recall where you're just like, God damn it, like just listen to me?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I don't want you throwing anybody under the bus, but
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things I'm always an advocate for is I want feedback from the players, and I want feedback from Grant, for example, who's my main point of contact. I want feedback from the org. I'm always asking for people to tell me how I can be better. And the reason why I say that is because my biggest bit of feedback I got from last season, and it kept coming up in my chats with Grant, and it came up in my end of season review. And it was something I was working on a lot, was I'm not very good at direct feedback. I feel, I'm being aggressive when I call individuals out. Obviously I do it, but not to the extent I should do it. And so there's definitely moments where, between a game, I'll be like, come on guys, we need to do this, we need to do that. You guys are not quite passing enough, or, whatever it is. And it will just be broad referring to the team. And one of the big things I've definitely noticed with the new team and how things are going now is I'm much more willing to call individuals out because I'm closer with the guys. I feel comfortable being like, that's not good enough, Nolly. You cannot do that anymore. And he goes, fair enough. And then they'll also call me out. Like if I'm late for something, they'll call me out because I'll call them out. And I think it's not an aggressive thing. It's just we hold each other to high standards, so we should be comfortable enough to call each other out directly. And I think those were the moments where between games I would look at what I just said and go, why didn't you just say what you thought rather than beat around the bush and give generic advice. And then the players would even come back and be like, I know you were referring to that person. Why didn't you just call that person out, you know? And then I would actually be like, actually, I was referring to you. And they'd be like, oh, I didn't even realize, you know? And so that a lot of the time they would ignore the advice because it wasn't aimed at them. So yeah, that's probably the biggest thing where I look back on last season and I just sort of do this after a team talk and go, what was I saying? You know, I was talking a load of rubbish. So yeah.
I think it's a unique circumstance, especially in Rocket League. And I don't know how much experience you have outside of Rocket League with that kind of level of expertise, but because I've been very lucky and very blessed to be in some of the positions that I've been, I've gotten to see the differences between how operations happen between like an older esport like League of Legends or Counter-Strike and the way that things operate there compared to Rocket League. And the age demographic, I think, might have to do a lot with that. The accountability, the responsibility that's held, the being blunt and calling someone on their ish when they mess up. We feel like we spare feelings a lot, I feel, in Rocket League, because with the younger age, people get offended or their ego gets hurt. And at the end of the day, like, hey, man, this is a business. Like, we're trying to win. You messed up. Like, that's on you. Own that. Get better. Let's improve it for next time. And not everybody is always direct with that. Do you agree with that sentiment that maybe some of it is because of the age or sparing feelings or whatever it may be? And maybe if we are a little bit harsher, yes, you may not like it eventually, but it is going to allow us to get better at a faster rate.
I think there's a few factors. I think the age is a part of it. I think one of the biggest things is the fact that we're an online esport mostly. I think it's very hard to be direct online because you don't see the face, right? Like, you guys are watching me smile as I'm talking right now. And if I go, hey, Lawler, you know, you could have done better with this, and you see me smile afterwards, you're going to be like, he's trying to improve me. Whereas if you don't have the face, you might mishear it as a, you know, a threatening message, or
don't want it to be misconstrued. Sure.
Yeah, exactly. And like, for example, with Nolly, he genuinely didn't think I was a great coach until we had the boot camp where we were in person together, and he got to know me as a person rather than as a voice in a team speak, you know? And I think that's happened to me several times. I mean, when I was at Vitality, one of the staff there, I was scared of him because every time I had contact with him, it was an email telling me, you need to do this. This isn't good enough. And I thought he was this nasty guy, you know, like always telling everyone off. Met him in person. He was smiley. He was really friendly. He was super lovely. And I was like, why did I think he was so evil? It's because you get that communication online. It's why people struggle in online relationships. It's why people struggle with friendships that don't have that in-person connection, because you can't read people fully online. I'd say that's probably the biggest factor, because especially with the non-English speakers. So I've noticed a lot, especially when you hear people play in tournaments like SMAD and stuff like that. Like, you know, Devo and Nolly came back from that and were like, it was really hard to read Fairy Peak because he didn't communicate much because his English isn't as strong, you know? And like, imagine trying to communicate online with no body language in a language that isn't your first language and not get misconstrued. I think that's probably the biggest cause of it, in my opinion anyway.
I think that's fair, because Fairy Peak is one of the people I respect most as a pro. I love Fairy Peak. I will advocate for him until the day I die, because he's not afraid to be blunt and tell you how he feels about things that matter. And a lot of people get offended by that and then are like, well, yeah, he's a dick. And it's like, no, man, he's just trying to hold you to the same standards that he holds himself. And the fact that anytime he carries himself in an interview, anytime I did brawl signups and stuff, he was always the first to provide feedback. He was always the first to sign up. He was always the first to advocate for things that he wanted. And it's like, I as a person respect that. Like, thank you for actually speaking up and having a voice, because you can complain and whine all you want behind closed doors, but until you actually say something, how are we supposed to improve? But the language barrier is something that gets brought up all the time. I mean, you are firsthand with that. Take me kind of through that. Like with Vitality, obviously, speaking French is not something you do.
No.
How difficult at times, and how much of an effect did it have between coaching, communicating, and just making sure the things that you were trying to say got across correctly? Because I'm sure that was received differently as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know fully because it's very much a two-way thing. Like, I've always tried to be as simple in my language to the French guys as possible, as welcoming. And I think the advantage I had in particular with KDOP I guess with Fairy Peak as well is I spent a lot of time in person with them, so it was a lot easier to build that relationship. It took a long time to get through to Fairy Peak, and seeing him grow as much as a person over the 2 years I was at Vitality with him was amazing, because he opened up a lot more. His English got better, his professionalism got better. He would start off by saying no to interviews, no to doing things for Vitality and so on, to being the guy who would say yes first before anyone else, so yeah, Fairy Peak is someone who it took a while to get through to that, but I think that was more just his own personal development as a professional and going from gamer to competitor, and I think K-Dop, it was a lot easier because he's a very good communicator in person. He's very cheeky, he's very smiley. You don't misconstrue what he wants when you're in person. And also he was very direct as well, similar to what you were saying. Like, if he didn't want to do something, he would tell you no, and he would tell you why. And if he felt like we were overstepping the line, he would tell you no, and he would tell you why. And then if you were giving him a good offer, he would say yes, but this is what I need, and it made it a lot easier. So I think for those guys, because the fact they were such good professionals, and we spent so much time in person, it was a lot easier to work with them. I think the hardest communication for me was when we're amongst French people. I'd be the single English speaking person there who didn't understand French, and I'd always feel incredibly guilty forcing everybody who's French around me to start speaking English, because I felt like I should know French by now, So I think that was the only setting where I felt like I was causing everyone else a problem by being around them, because then they had to speak English around me. But for the most part, everyone in person is lovely, and then online you can often just feel like there's a lack of care because it's very direct, right? But yeah, those guys were great. And then I think Tho, his English was near perfect. Whenever his English has been immaculate, but sometimes you don't get the extroverted Tho that you would if you were Dutch. Like, I've seen him when he speaks with his Dutch friends, he's the sociable guy. Same with K-Dop, right? Like, when they're speaking in their own language, they're very bubbly, extroverted, they're the center of attention, they're a bit cheeky and everything. And then in English, they are able to do that, but it takes a lot more thinking, so they're much more likely to sit in the background and let the conversation go around them like an introverted person would, So I think you do get slightly different personalities, a little bit more withdrawn personality when people are not speaking their main language. It's just like same with Fairy Peak, right?
Right.
Like he was always him and K-Dop were always the guys who were the center of attention amongst the French guys, and then in English they're a little bit more quiet and reserved,
Yeah, it's why I actually gravitated towards Farah as much as I did, because I love Farah. I think he's a fantastic
He's lovely,
kid.
isn't he?
Because I think he was the first out of all the guys at LANs that were French to go out of his way to speak with, whether it be casters, other players, whatever it is. He was just curious. He wanted to know more. I remember sitting and talking to him about like American phone plans for like an hour. Like, that's how far some of these, because he wanted to know about differences and other things. And I think that kind of is in similarity to what you're discussing, is you're getting that type of personality in that person in English, but we don't really get to see it because the French guys pretty much all congregate together and then go off and do their own thing. They're there, they exist, but they're not really talking. They're all kind of just whispering and murmuring to each other because it is so different. And I think a lot of it just definitely stems from talking with Farah, just being so self-conscious about their English. They're not confident in it. And I'm like, dude, Farah, we've been talking for 45 minutes straight. I haven't asked you once what you said. I don't need you to clarify. You're fine. And that applies to all of them. I remember, I think it was like season 7 or season 8, or maybe it was E-League, but I like said a joke and Shazette laughed, and I was like, I got him to laugh. Like, holy, he has emotion. I did it. And like it opened him up and stuff, but it's like, it's there. They just don't have the comfort level of doing it in English. So I can understand, like, for you being the only English guy doing that kind of stuff, I can imagine, maybe I can't imagine what it'd be like to kind of be that person in that environment. But we've been talking obviously a lot about your past, but I want to talk about your current. Obviously, Guild is all around you right now, so kind of hard to ignore there, which is good. Good for you. Way to be on brand, as always, Gregan. But
it's actually just behind these banners. There's all sorts of stuff I can't show. That's what it is. I've covered the rest of the apartment, so you can just see my nerd shelf, and the banners.
He's got like crazy man scribbles going on for strategies. That's actually what it is. No, the big thing that a lot of people ask and wish they had more insight on, is probably the one I get more than anybody else, is roster changes, which not many people understand the process of what it actually means to go through a roster change. All they see is either the rumor or the end result. They don't know about the inner workings that you guys actually scrimmed with like 12 different people. They don't see, like, they don't know that process. So can you take us from the releasing of your former player, finding the new player, and then signing the new player? I know who it is. I will make you tell me who it is publicly. But if you would like to speak broadly about the situation, that would also be appreciated. So I'll let you have the floor on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I've been through 4-5 signings, I guess, because I was around while the alpha move was happening at Vitality, and it's a very similar process to scouting teams, which I did for both Vitality and Guild. Is you find yourself in a position at the end of a season when a roster change can happen, and there's many ways it could go wrong. And the most common way, which most teams will probably deal with and struggle with, is the players take it into their own hands and, you know, they say to the player, we're dropping you, or this is happening, or whatever. And that's not really the best way to go about it. And I think it's the way traditionally it used to go, because orgs were very much in the background paying away. The way that Guild do it, and the way I believe it should be done, and this is the way it's done in much more professionalized esports, like your League of Legends and your Counter-Strikes, etc., is you get the coach involved, you get the org involved, and you essentially get feedback from the players, and you discuss it thoroughly with them. What would they feel comfortable with in the next season? What would they want? And then you start creating a hit list of players based off of the assumption that there is always a chance you'll stick with the original roster, because at the end of the day, that is an option in every roster move that happens. And it's we've seen it with Giants. There was talks about, well, Queso before, there were talks about them switching up the roster, and then they come back together. Yeah. You know, and they come back together, and that's always an option, right? There's always the ability to stick together. And then you start talking with the players, start talking with their agents, if they're represented by agents. You start talking with the orgs that they represent to find out whether there's a buyout cost and whether you can get them. And then you do all that before you even get a chance to try them out. Obviously, it's a lot easier if they're a free agent, because tryouts don't have any restrictions, but there'll be teams that will not allow their players to do tryouts. And then there'll also be teams that will be like, if we can agree a fee, or, you know, with the assumption that you will have to do a buyout, then you can go away and try out with teams, but we want to keep you, whatever it is, right? There's all sorts of stuff like that happens. And then the tryout process is essentially you practice with the new player, gain feedback from everybody. And this is what I mean, is the process can be a lot longer and drawn out, and I think that's the way Guild does it, because we want to make sure we do the due diligence to get the best player possible and get the right choice done. And then some teams will drop a player and have already been speaking to the player that they're switching in, and then it will all happen within the first few days after the roster swap, you know? So there's a whole range of ways to do it, but ours is a massive feedback cycle. You do a scrim, get feedback from players, watch replays, understand where the potential is. I think one of the things that I really feel I can do better than a lot of other coaches, because I've done it so many times, especially with scouting, especially with, you know, roster swaps and everything, is seeing the potential in a player, not just what they're presenting now, but what they will present under months of time under my workings, you know, and with the players that they're with. And so that was the big thing with Dave, for example. At the time,
Devo, I mean, for those that don't know Dave.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Devo, yeah.
Big Dave, as we call him, because he's 6'8".
Yeah, he is a big boy. He's also been gymming a lot, so he's a big boy.
Dude, I can't imagine. I remember the first time we went to Amsterdam, and like, I'm not a short dude, but I'm not tall. But like, even everybody
was tall.
Even everybody at production was like 6'7", 6'6", and I'm just like, I am a midget around like giants here. Like, this is horrible for my ego. Like, I'm like, I can't live over it.
Leaf at the time, weren't you? A lot. You're
oh yeah, dude. My entire career was like, oh, you're super short. I'm like, no, Leaf is 6'2", 6'3", and Waypunk's 6'5". Put me next to like Gibbs and Wave and like Carpet and like Shellgun and stuff. I'm an average height person. Leave me alone. But yeah, they put me next to all the tall people. It hurt. It hurt a little bit.
They had some high boxes behind the desk. People don't realize.
Boxes? Yeah.
They're like this high to try and get
did you
Gibbs
see,
and carpet up to the right height.
Who was it? It was Yummy Cheeseman and Wave Punk, where Yummy Cheeseman's like, no, I don't want to stand on an apple box. And then you saw like a 2-foot gap between the two, and they're like, we can't frame this. Like you have to. So yeah, it's tall people, but Dave too tall. Yeah. Anyway, back to Big Dave working out, doing his thing.
Yeah, when we were signing Devo, there was lots of options of players who people would go, oh yeah, they're really good right now. You know, sign them. We tried out lots of players who, they could be considered top 10, top 20 players by lots of people. And you try them out and it just doesn't quite fit. And you also look at them and you go, you're not going to work under this system. And you also look and you go, the way you play clashes with these guys and so on and so on. But Dave, I just saw him as this unfulfilled potential. And he played in a way that I think I appreciated more than a lot of people at the time, because he does a lot of stuff off the ball. And actually a few tryouts that we had were skeptical to try out because they're like, Dave's not that great. And then after they did the tryout, they went, there was just so much boost everywhere because of the way Dave played. And then it'd be like, and he just took up so much time when I needed to recover and all this stuff. And it's like, you get it now, right? And when we were trying him out at the time, it was the Barca splitting, right? It was Itachi, Roniki, Dave, all splitting in their own ways. And I remember people being like, why are you taking the worst of those three players? And it's like, that's thinking player by player, not team synergy and the potential that Dave had. And another thing is, I'm a big believer in the system that we have at Guild and the system that we do for coaching. And I believe there's a lot of players out there who've never been treated the way we treat players at Guild in terms of support outside of coaching and in the way I coach and the way the team works and everything. And so having Dave in that system where he's got that potential to be a world champion, he has done it before. He's found himself on teams that he wasn't quite comfortable in, didn't quite play the way he wanted to play. He didn't have necessarily the support around him to do what he needed to do. He wasn't looking after himself as well as he could be, all this stuff. And I was like, right, Dave in our system will flourish. And it happened, right? When we went on to win that regional and do well in the major, people were looking at Dave and going, he's actually probably one of the biggest factors as to why we're winning. People are looking at Nolly and looking at all the flashy stuff, but they're not looking at the stuff Dave's doing, So yeah, that's sort of the thought process in the signing is looking at the potential they will have under our system, not just the player that is there at that moment. And I think that's something that people will maybe reflect on 6 months down the line when you look at how far we've come from this off season,
Yeah, it's tough to explain that to the wider audience as well. I think you and I obviously joke around like Reddit and all that kind of stuff, but I don't do individual player tier lists. I hate them. I hate picking one player for their skills and assets, because Rocket League more than ever is a team-based game now. Like it is about a system, a structure. Everybody needs to have a large impact in some capacity, whatever that may be. I recently did, I think yesterday or the day before, an A to Z list where like who's the best player at that position, right? And a lot of people are like, how the heck can you pick Fairy Peak over First Killer? I'm like, because you guys have no idea what you're talking about. Like, First Killer's cracked. I get it. As an individual, what he can bring to a team is special, but he's not Fairy Peak. And I can't tangibly explain without like replay footage of why Fairy Peak is so impactful for a team, why he is so good at what he does, even if he's not hitting triple flip reset, double touches left and right. But it's all the other intangible, all the small things, the things why I love players like Fireburner, why Mist is such a good talent before he transitioned into offense. The Percys, the Archies, there's a lot of really talented players out there that do those intangibles really well. And I think the fact that you're advocating heavily for Devo is another reason why I also appreciate him as much as I do, because people only think of Devo from season 3 where he got enabled by Remco and Turbo. They're like, oh yeah, he hits double touches. That's why Devo's so cool. No, Devo finally was able to showcase that, yes, he can do these things, but that was a team enabling him to do what he wanted to do. And I think that might be the hardest thing for you as a coach, is with every new player experience situation, you may have a structure and stuff in mind, but I feel like your best asset is trying to find a way to enable a player to the best of their capabilities, something that they instinctually feel good at. Can you kind of tell me how difficult it may be where you have a structure or something in mind, and the pieces of the puzzle you get doesn't always fit perfectly. I'm sure there's been times where this player wants to have this certain play style, but you've got to convince them to do this other thing, or try to get them to the point of understanding, well, this is a better idea. Understand why this is important. Can you kind of take us through that process?
Yeah, I think the challenge is coaching the three players to be the best of those three players can be, as opposed to trying to coach them to play a way that you want them to play. And I think that's sort of what you're describing there about how do you bring the best out of these players. And it's something I'll never forget it. When I was learning how to swing a golf club, and I had a coach, and I was asking her, like, why are you giving me these tips and not giving that person the same tips? You know, like, why are you telling them to do it slightly differently to me? It was around the same aspect of the swing, but she was teaching them in a different way. And she said, I'm teaching you how to have your best swing, and I'm teaching him how to have his best swing. And that was like a life-changing moment for me as a coach, because it made me realize that we're all slightly different. The way we work, we're all slightly different. Our body shapes are different in physical sports, and in esports, the way we move is all slightly different. The way we want to play, the way we best play is all slightly different. And that's why certain teams just click well together, and why certain players work well together. For example, Fairy Peak and KDOP, they have amazing synergy, a lot due to their history together, but a lot just due to the way they move around the pitch. Fairy Peak is very pad focused, KDOP is very wide rotation, 100 boost focus. So it means that they both are allowed to get the boost they need, for example. And it's stuff like that I don't think people see on a bigger scale with the teams that are successful. The reason why Monkey Moon is considered one of the best players in the world is because the way Extra and Mutt by 8 play around him, you know?
And vice versa. Vice versa.
Yeah, exactly.
That team never looks like they're under pressure. That team never feels stressed. That team, for some reason, no matter the situation, just looks calm, cool, collected every step of the way. And it's because of the trust that they have in each other. That is not easy to accomplish. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that's part of the struggle we had with last season as a team, is I think there was some different mindsets. Notably, Tho wants to play a very aggressive play style, and I think he can be very successful with that. And I'm not saying that is a wrong play style to play in Rocket League. It's not the way I would choose to play personally, but I think it has its place. You know, the queso style, the sort of crazy high speed, we can beat him to the ball over and over again, make it so it's so chaotic that the players who thrive in chaos are the better players, you know? Yet Dave is like the antithesis of that. He thrives in a controlled environment. He thrives when he knows that his teammate is not going to go and is just going to hit the ball straight to him. Then Dave knows exactly what he has to do in the next space, you know? And I would say Nolly thrived in that environment, in particular in the regional that we won. I would say that was when we played the style that we were aiming to play the best we could. It was, you know, willing to take up space, like let people come towards us, knowing that at the right moment as a team we were working together to gain possession of the ball, and then it would be like the tiniest of overcommits we would play off of, things that you wouldn't even consider overcommits. And that was the sort of style we're going for. It's very similar to, if anyone who's watching or yourself knows boxing, sort of what Mayweather was known for, the idea of defense turning into offense through the tiniest of margins, right? And the only way you can do that in Rocket League is to have that structure that you work together as a team. And in that regional, one of the big things Tho did was he was very willing to go back and play support. And I think that was why it worked so well. And I think for Tho, it was so unnatural to do that once the pressure hit, it's hard to break out of habits, especially in high pressure situations. It's very easy to go into what is natural to you. And I'd say that's probably why that team didn't ever fulfill its true potential, is because it was so consciously competent as opposed to unconsciously competent, where we would just do it naturally, which is why I think BDS was this sort of like hidden gem, that three players who were just naturally fitting together with the way they wanted to play. From the moment they formed as a team, they seemed to work as a unit. And the same thing with when there was the Dignitas Gale Force era, that team of three just naturally clicked. And the way NRG play now, I think they've had to work on it a lot, but they work together as a team and don't have that typical North American flashy style, and that's because they've worked on that, and that's credit to them as a team, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's the evolving process of a player. I think The best example I can give with it, because I've talked about this a lot in detail, is you look at Justin. When Justin used to feel like I had to be the guy to make up for everything, I had to go for this challenge, I had to step up when we were losing, and it would force a lot of issues. It would force a lot of mistakes, and that's where they would get punished. And now you look at Justin, his situational awareness is just through the roof, knowing when and when not to challenge, knowing when to just rotate out and trust that he's got Squishy behind him, knowing when to make the right decision in every aspect. And it's not flashy, it's not over the top, but is it damn successful? It's super consistent. And then every single player on that team still has the pop-off capability, but they don't have to rely on it. I think that's what makes them so threatening. And a lot of it has to do with what you're talking about, instinctual play. Yeah, we fall back, we know when and what we need to do. And we've got a great communicator in Garrett that when he's on, like, oh, we can't lose. And you're starting to see Squishy speak up more. Like, that confidence is now starting to develop from everybody in that team, where everybody is speaking up, and it's a fantastic addition. So yeah, there's a lot of really good teams, a lot of really good players out there. But again, like you mentioned, sometimes there's conflicting play styles. Sometimes there's instinctual play or natural play that doesn't always align. And, sometimes that can lead to whether it be a roster change or success, failure, peaking, as some people call it, honeymoon phase. It's just finding a way to make sure that base level is at a high all the time, which I'm sure is very grueling when it comes to being a coach. I'm sure there's a lot that goes into that. Yeah,
there is a lot. And I think to refer back to the sort of guild approach to things, many people have heard me mention it before, and we're still working on it. It's a growing process. It takes time, and of course, the more in-person stuff we do, like we've got a boot camp coming up as preparation for next season. That will allow us to do more of this stuff. But it's the holistic approach, which is something I've always been a big believer in. Right back to the season 7 water boy kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
If they're hydrated, hydration is no longer a factor that could be affecting their ability to perform at their best. If they are generally fitter, healthier people, they're less likely to fatigue under a tournament setting, so therefore they're going to play better longer into a tournament. All of these things are tiny little factors. And at the end of the day, the biggest factor to define win or not is how good you are at Rocket League. And you'll see it time and time again, players who show that potential. I mean, Nolly, regional, we won. I keep referring back to it. Nolly played like he was the best player in the world. And if we can create that ability out of Nolly every single time, then Nolly's going to be one of the best players in the world, right? It's that inconsistency that plagues so many Rocket League players, and I believe personally it's due to the outside factors more than anything. For Nolly, the big thing we've done in this season, or we'll plan to do this season, he's moved down to London. He's now a few tube stops away from me. He's got access to swimming pool. He's got a gym. We've got the PT working with him. We're going to start focusing on nutrition. He's going to learn to cook for himself. He's got a much better sleep cycle. All of these things. He's got a social life. All of these things are factors that I believe play into the consistency of a player. Nolly had this. It was like the photo shoot buff. Whenever he came down to London and had to do a photo shoot for Guild, he would come back. Once he got his hours back up, he would be one of the best players in the world. And it was because he had that social interaction. He'd been out of the house. He traveled a bit. He, made himself look nicer for the photo shoot and everything. So he felt good because of the way he looked. And all that kind of process would buff his in-game ability because he was feeling better. And when you speak to traditional athletes, these are all things that they do more so because they're competing in a physical space. Therefore, it's more proven in that way. But there's no reason why it wouldn't have the same effect in a gaming sense. And you look at the teams that have been consistent and successful in last season of Rocket League, you've got BDS, NRG, and Vitality. And the times where NRG and Vitality dipped away, you look at their setup, they weren't spending as much time doing in-person stuff, right? Vitality did a boot camp before that end of season championship. They come in, perform incredibly well. Time together in person was a factor there. BDS, Monkey Moon and Extra were together in person all the time. They were very consistent. Mark by 8 was probably the most inconsistent on that team. And for lots of factors, I'm sure, outside of just that. But spending time in person, having your human contact through work is so key. And anyone who's watching who's a bit older and maybe has been working from home during the pandemic, having worked in an office beforehand, you will have noticed the same performance effect on your work and your team that you work around is you go through these phases where you get extremely hardworking and it goes really well while you're at home, but it's not sustainable because you need that in-person aspect and the full holistic approach of getting out, getting healthy, being active to really get the most out of it. And the reason why I'm going on so much about this is because this is the one area of esports that anyone who knows me has spoken to me at all at events or anything like that. I believe we're lacking so much in esports right now. And it's because to me, it's so blatantly obvious from my background in sport and medicine to see that this is the next step. And you see it in League of Legends and CSGO. They've got chefs, PTs, psychology is all part of the system they have there. And with Rocket League being a little bit behind, a few steps behind, you're only seeing it in those top teams. And that's the reason why those top teams are staying at the top. So yeah, rant over.
No, it's an important one and a good one. It's part of the reason why I made the change I did, this year, focusing on mental and physical health, making sure that I have effort put in every single day to get me out of the house. And that's probably the best advice I can give as well to anybody who's watching this video. When's the last time you just went outside, went for a walk? It's crazy what that will do for you. Just fresh air. Part of the reason why I moved to a place that has 2 balconies that are big open natural lighting. Crazy what it does for your mentality. So yeah, I'm a huge advocate for it with you as well. But we're going to move on to something new that I've never done on Rocket Talk before, but I figured it's a great time to do it. And this one is one where we actually vet questions from the community. I asked last week that, hey, we're going to be having Gregan on. There's certain things that if you guys want to know, things that you want to know about the process, whatever it is, let's ask him directly. So I'm going to filter through some of these. We're going to do this for about 10 minutes. And then Gregan, I know you're a busy man. I'll let you go back to doing nothing, all right? So I know you've got today to spend some time on yourself. So I don't want to take too much of that time away from you. So
I have an early meeting, so I should get to bed early. That's what I'm telling myself.
Yeah, okay, whatever. I'm sure you'll be up late doing something. First question. How do you handle a player who is currently having a really bad game?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think sometimes you've got a few approaches depending on the situation. You've got mental reset. So how can you get them to mentally reset? And one of the big parts of that is not allowing that moment to be the moment where you teach them how to mentally reset. You need to have taught them that in the lead up to that moment. So one of the big things I always strive for is having a communication method that we have. So we have buzzwords that we use in certain moments to reset our mindset, buzzwords to talk about the way we're playing. So for example, if someone's rushing, they know the language that I'll use to help them get out of that rush state and so on. And then I think the work with the psychologist will help them reset mentally there. And I think all of that stuff, it's very hard to do that in the moment because you have to teach them how to get out of that moment. So that needs to be done in the build up. So that would be my main bit of advice, is not allowing that high pressure situation be the first time that you have to get them out of that mindset. And at the end of the day, if that doesn't work, there's damage control processes. You can do stuff like, hey, try and be a little bit safer and let the other guys try and do their thing. But then that can also have negative effects because then they start playing weird. The main thing you just got to do is try and get them back into the system that you've worked up to in the months leading up to that moment.
Great answer, man. Has it ever happened where players sometimes don't listen to your advice you give because they think they're better, and since they are the pro, they don't need to listen to you?
Yeah, I mean, the moment I joined Vitality, that was the case. I begged the players to let me coach them. And actually, it was, I think, Freaky in that first initial team of Freaky, Pashi, Ferry, who was like, oh, we need to get Gregan in, because I used to stand on stage with them at G-Fancy Elite Series.
Right. God, I miss G-Fancy Elite. Oh.
Yeah, they just weren't about it. And, that's fine. I've got to build that respect up. And I think I've had several players who might not have respected me, even back Supersonic Avengers days. That would have been the case. And I think as time goes on, coaches have got more and more respect. I think some players who I've coached might have just been too polite to even suggest that they weren't listening. But I think I've got a really nice spot now at Guild, and I've got enough experience now that my players trust me. And I think the biggest thing to happen for that, for someone like Nolly and Dave, was to progress from being in a rough spot up to regional winner. I think that really showed that the process was working. And then from that point, you've got ultimate buy-in, right? So yeah, building up buy-in is the hardest part of coaching. And it should never be expected. You have to earn it as a coach. And I think that's where a lot of coaches do struggle in, if they're not experienced as coaching. Heck, before joining Guild, I listened to a whole audiobook about how to get buy-in from a strength and conditioning coach who worked with NFL players. So I've even studied the process of buy-in because I felt like I was struggling with that previously, and I didn't deserve the respect I needed to earn it.
Hey man, that's transitioned perfectly into the next question. I think you're reading these alongside me. I don't know how you did it, but two-parter here. Obviously, being an SSL, obviously you're a high-level player, really good. Not necessarily a requirement to be a coach. That being said, what are some good resources for people that are looking to get into coaching? Ways that they can gain experience, all that kind of stuff. And then the second part of that, is there any inspirations that you have that have helped you along your coaching, whether it be through listening to certain people talk, like strength and conditioning, or your background in medicine, any of that kind of stuff that you can kind of push or recommend to people, whether it be a book, podcast, whatever it may be?
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, coaching is not something you ever achieve full potential of. You're always learning, always improving. And so to talk about like the things that I've used to learn and improve it. That was the first question, right? It was what resources have I used?
Yeah, so obviously you're a high level player, but for coaching and stuff like that, for people that are hopeful for trying to get into it, is there certain resources that you've used to get to that level, and then inspirations or anything that you've modeled towards or stuff like that?
Yeah, and I think that's a big topic area of, is it more important to have the knowledge or more important to have the coaching skills? You look at certain players who've retired and they've gone to coach a team, and that team's not gone on to improve much. You're thinking, surely they can do it because they're a pro player. And in fact, I spoke to some of them. I'm sure he won't mind me saying it. I spoke to Snasky early on, and when he was starting to coach, and he was just like, there's so many things I'm thinking that I know I want them to do, and I just don't know how to get it from my brain into their brain. And that is in itself is a skill of how to coach. And I'm very fortunate. I've been coaching most my young adult life. In fact, I was coaching cricket when I was 15. I was teaching people how to play the African drums while I was at school. I coached cricket all through till university, where I started coaching ultimate frisbee. I ran the Ultimate Frisbee Society at University of Sheffield. I used to coach fitness for 3 years while I was there. I would coach friends in all sorts of things. I've always been a coachy person. So over that time, you learn the skill of coaching itself. Case in point,
like you mentioned, we versus I, or you, we need to get better at this. We need to do this thing, rather than, hey, you messed up. Makes a difference.
Yeah, and it's not just you messed up, but it's forming that sentence. Like every sentence, you get better at communicating it. The skill of coaching is incredibly underrated. And I've listened to TED Talks, I've listened to several audiobooks. I've worked with performance psychologists, and that's the other thing as well. People think performance psychologists are just for the players. I've worked with performance psychologists to help me how to get psychology integrated into my coaching. I've worked with professional sports coaches. I was very fortunate at one point to be very close friends with a GB Olympic medalist, and I learned so much from her and how much she trained, what she did every single day, and the habits she got into, and she recommended a lot of stuff for me. So it's all just absorbing information through your life, and it's why coaches tend to be older. It's why they tend to be more mature. It's because it's a skill that comes with age, and it's teaching, coaching, guidance, parenting. They're all forms of educating someone who needs support. And I think that whole journey for any aspiring coach, I would recommend just doing it, just coaching people, whether it is in gaming, whether it's in sport. Just get involved in coaching, get involved in organizing things. And you'll learn that skill. And in terms of the Rocket League side, I've got 8,000, almost 9,000 hours in Rocket League, of which must be about 3,000 of that is spectating, from commentary, coaching, whatever it is, right? Replay analysis. You can live vicariously through your players, and not need to play at their level. If I wanted to, obviously I love playing Rocket League. I'm pushing for SSL this season at the moment. I'm like mid GC3. I really want to get it early. You know, that's because I love Rocket League. But essentially, from the moment I got the job of coach at Guild, I didn't need to touch ranked. I didn't need to touch free play. It's good to do it, to try things out. But if I was to do that, I would have to then see the game through replays, see the game through analysis a lot more. And I think that's the key difference between someone who knows the game better and someone who might not know the game as well. Is I think you can cut shortcuts a little bit more by just knowing the game at a higher level, like feeling the game at a higher level. That would probably be my main. I'm not saying that I should cut corners replay analysis. I think that's one of my big things that I learned towards the end of the last season, is I needed to do more replay analysis, because I did start to get to a stage where I started to struggle to know what to say. But yeah, if you're a high level player, you can see the game slightly quicker. You can analyze slightly quicker, I guess. But even that's person to person, right? Some players don't really have an analytical mindset. They just do. And so they might not see the game that way, even if they're at a high level.
A lot of these younger kids are just instinctual with it. They're like, why'd you do that? And I'm like, I don't know, I just was in the right place. What I thought would be the best option. It's like, okay, man. Like, if it works for you, sick. This last one I think we're going to go with, because I think it's super important. I think you're a heavy advocate for it as well. And it has a lot to do with mental health. A lot of these questions have to do with mental health and a lot of things about it. And I want to leave it as open or as broad as you want on this one, just so you can advocate for however you want to approach the topic. But mental health as a whole, whether it be applied as a coach, as a player, or just in your everyday life, can you talk about the importance, what it means to you, all that kind of stuff? Because I also am a firm believer that, especially as a guy, we're kind of told to just suck it up, be a man, blah, blah, blah. But mental health is something that I feel needs to be discussed and advocated for more and more, especially as a guy, more than ever it's been, especially with all the stuff that's been going on lately.
Yeah, and I encourage anyone who is a pro player in a pro team. I mean, this is essentially, if anyone is watching this is essentially giving free advice, is talk with your players, talk about things that you're struggling with. It's so key to have an open environment. In fact, actually, you can see right here, this is the Guild Pillars of Performance that we created for last season. One of those sections is an open environment. The whole idea of talk about your feelings. If you're feeling down, don't feel bad to say, hey, sorry, I'm feeling a bit down. I mean, today I went to the gym and I apologized to the instructor and said, hey, look, I'm feeling crap this morning. I'm sorry if I'm a bit short with you. And then we just both jokingly went, at least I'm getting fit, feeling crap, you know? And it's like, just those conversations, being willing to open up about it is the first key message, because normalizing those conversations is what allows people to feel comfortable going and seeking help. Secondly, I've been through some pretty weird patches in my life, mental health wise. I'm very fortunate to not have any diagnosed form of mental health. I did go through a phase where I almost got put into the depression category, but it was considered low moods because I was able to get out of it through life changing habits. But isolating yourself and gaming a lot is not a healthy way to live a life. For some people, it might not affect you too much, but health is split into three categories: social health, mental health, and physical health. Mental health is heavily affected by the other two. What you eat, what you drink, what you do every single day to your body can make a massive difference to your mental health. Some people choose meditation. I've never been one for it, but that's a great way to improve your mental health. People do long walks, great way for your mental health. Eating better, great way for your mental health. Cutting out things like alcohol. One of my good friends recently stopped drinking because she felt like she was getting anxious every time she drinks. Stuff like that. It's finding out those life-changing habits that improve your mental health is so key. Social health is obviously variant from person to person. For me, I need that social life to be able to improve it, and I'm sure it's the case for a lot of people, to have people around you, genuine friendships around you, genuine friendships with your family. People often disjoint themselves from their family, and that can be detrimental to their mental health. And so it's key to have those close friendships with people around you. We live in an online world. Online friendships are great. my best friends are Stumpy and Cole. A lot of you will know them as the casters, and we're predominantly online, but we try as often as possible to meet up to make sure we have that in-person connection, because it's so key. So that would be the big area of that. In terms of linking it to being a pro player, you got to have a life outside of being a pro player. I think that's the case for anyone. You've got to have a life outside of work. You've got to have a life outside of whatever it is you're doing primarily. You have to create a life outside of it, because if your day-to-day success is dictated by the thing which you are performing in, like being a pro player, whether it's work or whatever, that determines the mood for your evening. It determines how you feel on a daily basis. It determines whether you fall asleep well, whether you wake up well, all those kind of things. So try and create a life outside of that. And one of the most common signs someone has depression is the not enjoying things that they normally enjoy. And so that you can see how that would be the opposite is true. Is if you've got a clinical condition, you would stop enjoying the things you love doing. That's why it's so important. And then the last thing, which every medical student gets told, is don't take my advice. If you're feeling mentally unwell, go see a doctor, because there's people out there who know what they're doing. See a therapist, all of those kind of things. It is healthy to do that. There is nothing wrong with seeking help and finding people. There's helplines. I don't know any off the top of my head, but there's helplines. There's people who can help you. I'm just a person who's spoken anecdotally there, and maybe some of you will resonate with some of those thoughts. But at the end of the day, you need to find people out there who can support you, whether that's family, whether that's friends, whether that's medical support, whether that's a helpline therapist, whatever it is. Don't be scared to get help. That's all I'd say.
I will add nothing to the back end of that, because what is there for me to add? I will say that was supposed to be the last question, but I would be yelled at if I didn't ask one more. Gregan, who are you guys picking up? Who's your new third?
Well, after my performance in the IWO, we have decided to go ahead with playing with me, and we'll be picking up a substitute who will be permanently taking my spot on the roster.
Makes sense. Makes sense. All right. Well, he's not going to leak it. I don't blame him. Doesn't want to get in trouble with Guild, who treats you oh so well. And I can advocate for that as well. Anytime I've gotten to work with Guild and everybody else, they've been absolutely fantastic to me, whether it be for a trivia thing I did or otherwise. They go above and beyond. So again, Gregan, fantastic representation for not only your team, but also the community as well. So first and foremost, obviously, love you, miss you, wish I could see you. But obviously soon. we're gonna have to hold out for whenever the heck that'll be. Second, thank you for taking the time, man. We've been going at this for about an hour, and got to talk about a lot of serious topics outside of just Rocket League that I'm a huge advocate for. So appreciate you opening up, sharing your insights, both coaching related as well as personal life stuff, as it does mean a lot to me and hopefully everybody else that it resonates with. But before we let you go, man, I'm gonna let you advocate, talk about your stuff, chill out a little bit. If people want to go sub you on your Twitch, whatever it is, the floor is yours, man.
Of course. Well, I'd obviously advocate for the wonderful Guild. Support us in the upcoming season of RLCS. Hopefully, you can support a team that's on an upwards journey and not on a big old roller coaster. That's the plan.
Yeah, my heart would appreciate that, man. If you could, that'd be great.
And then, of course, follow me on socials if you're interested. I'm on a big fitness journey similar to Lawler, so go check him out. But my journey's slightly different. I'm trying to get big, strong. You're trying to get big, sexy. So well,
one and the same, man. One and the same.
Yours is probably more interesting on Instagram, but if you want to see me pick up big weights, I put it on Instagram all the time, Gregan_Mike, and then on Twitter, it's Gregan, Gregan. And I do stream occasionally on Twitch. If you want to see some coach gameplay, then I sometimes do stream Rocket League, but I'm not a streamer. Go support the streamers out there who are trying to make a living out of it. I'm very fortunate that Guild support me amazingly, so I don't have to worry about it. Just do it for a bit of fun. But I'd love to see some of you in chat. If you've come from Lawler's content, come over and say hi, and love to carry on the conversation if you've got any further questions.
Again, Gregan, always a fantastic advocate for all things Rocket League. Again, greatly appreciate you taking the time, man. But that is going to do it for us here for today for Rocket League, Rocket Talk, Rocket, whatever the heck you want to call it. Even though sometimes we don't even talk about Rocket League. Gregan, again, greatly appreciate the time, and hopefully we see you soon, all right?
Thanks for having me.
Don't be a stranger, man. I'm so mad. My scene never transitioned, so it was just my full screen the whole time.
Oh, so there was no webcam.
I'm so mad.